It's just as likely to happen among women as among men, in which case it's not toxic masculinity. So.
Everyone, it's Blue. Make sure you like and subscribe and go check out my Patreon. It's only $5 a month and you get at least an extra video every week.
We opened a coffee shop in my hometown for people with Down syndrome to work at, and it's going. Don't clap. I didn't do it for the claps. I did it, you know.
Today I'm going to be doing a reaction to Jordan Peterson on toxic masculinity.
Jordan, my question is, what is the antidote towards toxic masculinity?
Well, the antidote is responsible masculinity. And what does responsible mean? It means, well, if you're responsible, then you're trying to do what's honest first. So you're careful with your speech and your actions. You're careful with your speech in that you don't say things that you know to be false. And you're careful in your actions so that you don't have to lie about what you do. That's a good start. And then the next thing would be that you're capable of taking responsibility for yourself at least, so that once you're an adult, no one else has to bend over backwards to ensure that you don't unduly suffer in the world. And so that's responsibility for yourself. And then if you get halfway good at that, well then, you might think about taking on the responsibility of a family and contributing to your community and doing all those things in a harmonious manner. And that's obviously the antidote to toxic masculinity, which is not a phrase I would generally use. I just think about it as, what would you call it? I think sinful behavior is a much more accurate representation personally, but it's honesty and responsibility. And I do think about it as a function of harmony. I got that a lot from reading Jean Piaget, whose work was a psychological extension of Kant's categorical imperative, because Kant believed that you should act in a manner such that if the way you acted became a universal, that would be beneficial. But Piaget formalized that very nicely, showing that one of the bases for the emergence of a system of genuine ethics was an iterable form of reciprocity. So that, so for example, I can give you a quick example of that. My granddaughter, who's now 15 months old, has discovered a new game. And it's a Piagetian game, a developmental game. And she discovered this by watching, but also on her own, and partly because it's a very deep part of human nature. So she has this little wooden spoon. And her game is, you sit with her at the table, and her game is, she gives you the spoon. And then you take it. And then you give it back. And then she's all happy about that. And then she gives the spoon to the person who's sitting beside her. And then they give it back to her, and she's very happy about that. And so it's an amazing game, because she's learned to give up something, to let go of something that she wants, and to trust someone else to return it to her. And that's what she's playing with. And then you can play with that game. It's quite fun. So, and you have to pay careful attention to her and watch how she's manifesting her emotions. And so maybe what you do is you take the spoon and you hide it under your hand. That sort of disconcerts her a bit. Then you show it to her and pick it up and give it to her, and she's happy about that, because what she sees is that the principle of reciprocity can maintain itself across a set of transformations, and that's really exciting to her. Or you can give her the spoon and she can give it back to you, and then she can reach for it and you can pull it away a quarter of an inch, and that sort of disconcerts her, and then she'll Do you want to repeat that?
I'm sorry. I said that didn't cover really toxic masculinity, right? Because
yes, it's dealing with the principle of reciprocity.
You just said that you have to be honest and responsible as a man, right?
Well, put it this way. When I'm giving the spoon back to my granddaughter, I'm not engaging in toxic masculinity. And that was the point that I was trying to make, is that, and this deep reciprocity and trust is part of the social contract. And it is precisely the antidote to what precisely, since we're going to pursue this, what...
I really wanted to let him finish his point, but I'm starting to feel like this is going to be the only comment and question he gets. So I'll just go ahead and pause now, in case it's the entire video. because it's already more than halfway over. But I love like that game and that psychological development. I've never heard of that person, so I'm going to have to rewind and actually hear it again because I don't want to butcher their name. I haven't heard of that person before. But I thought that was really fascinating. I immediately thought about all these ideas of you give her the spoon and she gives it back, but then you also trust, okay, well, I know you gave it to me, but you need to trust that I also may want to share this with somebody else, and you give it to somebody else, but then that person gives it back to her. There's just all these different things that you could do with that, so I immediately am so fascinated by it and want to look it up. And I think that it's a fair point to kind of use that example, even if it looks very dumbed down and off topic, because I could see how she's confused, like, where did you go with this? How does that solve anybody's problem? Okay, we get it. Treat everybody how you want to be treated, but even deeper than that, it's not so much him approaching it as actual toxic masculinity. It was formed as that question to him, but kind of how he delivered it back is just don't be a bad person. And again, it's probably simplified because I don't know all of the exact words that he said and used. Toxic masculinity doesn't exist. That's not two words that are conjoined together because masculinity itself is toxic. It just happens to be if a male is toxic and he has those features of being masculine, they're now tied and correlated. No, a person who happens to be a man, who happens to have those masculine characteristics, is toxic, but it's not the masculinity part that you should blame as a whole for anybody who has those characteristics as what is toxic itself. If you really want to take it down where no masculinity, there are certain masculine things that could be toxic, fine. There is still another argument. If you're going to argue that there are certain things that are on a masculine side that could be, toxic, then there could still easily be feminine things that are also toxic. So if it's going to be kind of generalized and picked at and you want to have this argument, I would say you kind of need to have both.
It is precisely the antidote to what precisely, since we're going to pursue this, what precisely is toxic masculinity, as opposed to, say, toxic femininity or toxic humanity? What exactly are you asking me about?
It's kind of cool that
I really want to know what you like, how you would describe toxic masculinity. Because
No, I want you to define what toxic masculinity constitutes. Since we're going to define things so carefully, let's do it.
Well, I think.
Okay, guys, sorry, but we really have to move on. So there will be more questions later on. There will be a lot of opportunity.
No,
to
but
ask
maybe
questions.
let's if you.
that wasn't.
Okay, so let's define it shortly.
All right, shortly, please.
Okay.
Cut off.
I think that the moment when you kind of, I have a hard time to kind of describe it in English. Let's say, that you kind of go over a boundary that kind of neglects the freedom of the opposite, gender or whatsoever. So that's toxic masculinity, and that you kind of have.
But that would also be toxic femininity.
Well, may I finish my sentence?
Sure.
Please? Thank you. And then also, I lost my sentence now. But no, I will be back. I'm back. But more in the sense that. Yeah, can someone help me here in the audience?
Okay, so before we move on, let me point something out. That I was willing to undertake this line of discussion, allowing for the possibility that the category of toxic masculinity had some content, right? But if we're going to pursue that line of reasoning and quibble about the answer, then we're certainly going to quibble about the definition that's embedded in the question. And so part of what's happened in our discourse is that we're required ethically to assume a priori, merely out of politeness, that the utterance toxic masculinity actually constitutes a meaningful phrase. And if you push it, you find very rapidly that it doesn't, because it's very, very, very difficult to define, and definitions actually matter. And so if it's a matter of transgressing against the boundaries of gender-appropriate behavior, well, first of all, that indicates that there's something universal and normative about gender-appropriate behavior, which is something that people who push the idea of toxic masculinity generally tend not to presume. And second, it's just as likely to happen among women as among men, in which case it's not toxic masculinity. So maybe on to the next question.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, yes, take a drink of water. That was, if I could just aspire to be anything, one of the things would probably be as well spoken as Jordan Peterson. I'm kind of getting to that point. And it's not just because of an agreement of like what he's saying. Even if he were to be saying something else and he sounded that way and made his points, it's kind of for that reason. I mean, he says it in such an organized fashion, it's actually almost hard to lose him, even when he's so intelligent and using words that you may not even know what he's saying. I also feel like something that he pointed out wasn't necessarily that he believes that somebody who were to use that word doesn't have an explanation or a definition for what it means. He even gave her the floor. So I think he's open-minded to, could you explain and elaborate on what it means? Because I find it difficult, and I haven't heard a good explanation or definition yet. However, I think the problem that it seems like he points out is that a bunch of people will latch onto these words and just regurgitate them, and I think a lot of it becomes even more vague than it already was and loses its meaning because it's used so often. A lot of the times people will just say it towards anything just to insult you or label you, and half the time they don't actually have their own, oh, well, this is what this means and this is why I said it to you. It's like, well, you're actually just throwing out words now that you don't know what it means because you've heard like the last 5 people say it. So I think he just also is defending that, like, be careful with what you say. It sounds like a very popular word that's just going around right now. Do you actually feel you have your own definition that ties to that before you just use it because you've heard it on the news? So yeah, that would be probably most of everything that I would have to say about this video, but let me know what you thought about it, and if you haven't already, check out all my links and my Twitch and my Patreon, and I'll see you all next time.